I'm getting a message that says I am paused due to poor connection. So we'll just see how this goes. Happy Mercury and Gatorade, everybody. Good morning. Yeah, hello and welcome to your weekly wizard report. I am your weekly wizard, Joan Emerson Bell, aka the Blind Stallion Space Wizard. Um, and welcome to This Week in Space, which is my weekly offering on the astrological weather of the week. I'm getting some messages that are saying poor connection. I don't know. On Instagram, am I clicking in and out? Are you seeing anything? How's this working? So, yeah, Mercury's in Gatorade today. And it looks like that is pretty on brand. Feeling better than death. I love it. All right. And that is eternally optimistic, I think. Um, so yeah, if Okay, yeah, connection is not good. I'm gonna restart the Instagram and Astrostar, I will be with you in a minute. Um, but let me just see here. Okay. All right. Let's see if this works any better. Good morning, everybody. Hello out there in oh man. So, all right. We may have lost the Instagram feed for today, which is unfortunate, but how's everything looking over here on Astrostar? Okay. Okay, great. It's great on Astrostar. If you're on Instagram, check me out on Astrostar. You can watch this later on YouTube. I don't know if this is going to work on Instagram, but without further ado, let's get to the Astro Weather of the week. The big news is that Mercury has stationed all up in Gatorade, which occurred yesterday during the new moon in Virgo, sorry, the new moon in Leo, and Mercury stationed retrograde at 4 degrees and 6 minutes of Virgo. I'm going to try this one more time, but I can keep talking while I'm doing this. Um, I just wanted to work so bad. Um, and I think this is the sort of Mercury retrograde vibe is I have my will and the things that I want to do, and then there's the will of the universe, which is slightly different and may not be in alignment with what I want. And I think the sort of questions that we get to ask ourselves is it worth it? Like, am I going to keep battling with Instagram and the lack of connection there, and like derail everything else because I really want to do it the way that I want to do it? Or am I just going to let it go? Which I think I'm going to let it go. Sorry, Instagram. Um, and so. Yeah, let me just close this up because that didn't work. All right, so we're back. And I think that the Mercury retrograde really asks us to slow down, to take a moment, to take a break. And, when we are met with challenges that are outside of our control, which, internet connectivity, flight scheduling, other people's schedules, all of these things are kind of outside of our control. And Mercury retrograde asks us to really slow down and be like, what's happening here, right? What am I trying to do? Is there a better way? Um, do I need to take a break? Do I need to retreat a little bit? Do I need to stop, drop, and reconsider what's happening here? And oftentimes, with Mercury retrograde, the answer is yes. Right. And I think that this is really on brand for the week. And I think it's, this is kind of funny way to illustrate a point is, as I'm trying to do this talk, the connectivity issues, which is definitely like Mercury retrograde and how I respond. And I like feel some parts of me. Oh, great. I'm glad this is better. I feel some parts of me getting really activated, being like, oh, but I wanted it to work. Right. But being able to take a breath and roll with the punches, and I think being able to adapt because Mercury is retrograde in Virgo, which is a mutable sign, and mutable signs are all about adaptation, right? Being able to kind of pivot and roll with it. And so the name of the game this week is to slow down and kind of like look before you leap, or consider or reconsider, which is a retrograde word, what we are doing and what the best way to achieve our goals is. And like I was sort of presented with, am I going to just like keep trying to make something work and derail everybody else who is watching this? And I chose no. And I can sort that out later, but I think this is a better way of doing things. This is actually like easier for me, even though these parts are activated about that didn't work, but that's okay. That can be okay. Um, Whoa, Gina Maria is saying that last night during a huge Tony Robbins event, over 10,000 people, their power went out for about an hour. Yep, that is, some Mercury and Gatorade right there. Yeah, and welcome here from the Instagram weirdness. I don't know what's going on, and I may never know what's going on, but that's all right. We're here now. And, with all of these offerings, I trust that the people who are going to need it are going to find their way here. And so, let's just revisit yesterday's new moon in Leo for a moment, because that was a pretty big day. Um, uh, Wounded Healer is saying that we're being hit with like big solar storms. That's interesting. And, I think that's also pretty on brand. The sun being in domicile in Leo, right, having a lot of power there. And, this new moon, which occurred yesterday, sorry, what month is it? The new moon, which occurred yesterday, August the 4th, um, was um, in the sign of Leo, which is a fixed fire sign, which, it was asking us to kind of plant seeds and intentions around what we are passionate about, and to think about themes of authenticity and sovereignty and the ways that we can step into the spotlight and really shine for who we are, right? And so this is the kind of seed that gets planted at the new moon, and you may have planted different seeds or set different intentions or done nothing at all, and that's totally all right. I'm just sort of thinking about some of the overarching archetypes of Leo and some ways that we can work with this. And so one thing to think about is that the new moon in Leo, which occurred at 12 degrees of Leo, was enclosed by an applying sextile from Mars at 9 degrees of Gemini, and a separating sextile from Jupiter at 15 degrees of Gemini, on the other side. So we have the new moon, right, the sun and moon together at 12 Leo, and then 60 degrees away, we have Mars sort of applying to sextile that, and Jupiter separating from a sextile. So they're enclosing it, right? So that sextile from Mars and Jupiter are on either side of that new moon, which is awesome, right? And what the Mars and Jupiter relationship is doing is it's about this big energy, right? Mars is desire and appetite, and they really like go after what they want. We can think about Mars as the sword that is sort of cutting away everything that is in the way of what they want, or the spear tip that is just sort of directed directly at what they want. Right. And Jupiter is the planet of expansion. They make things bigger, right? So they are increasing the kind of courage and energy to pursue what we desire. And that kind of sense of enthusiasm was surrounding this new moon by sextile, which is a supportive and communicative aspect, right? So as we are in this kind of like Leo, dark Leo kind of seeding moment, there is Mars being like, this is what I want. And Jupiter's like, make it bigger, bigger, do it more, right? Why settle for less? And so I think it's like really was really bringing in this like sense of enthusiasm, right? And so the Mars and Jupiter will make their conjunction next week on August the 14th, and we'll talk about that next week. But these are some of the kind of themes that are encoded in that relationship: is Mars going after what it wants, and Jupiter being like, make it bigger, do it more, right? Why do things when you can overdo things? Come on, right? And Mars being like, yeah, going for it. And so that all sounds great. However, Mercury station retrograde yesterday, as we just had a great example of, is me like frantically trying to make Instagram work, which didn't. And Mercury is the ruler of Gemini, which is where Mars and Jupiter currently are. And so Mercury is the kind of person who is running the show behind the curtain, right? And this Mercury retrograde is about slowing down, right? Considering, reconsidering, rethinking. So Mars is like, let's go. And Jupiter is like, no, let's go twice as fast. And Mercury's like, slow your roll, right? Where are you going? Why are you doing that? Why do you want to do that? Right? Let's look before we leap. And so while there's this like newfound energy and drive to forge one's path and to go after what one wants, we're like really being asked to look before we leap and to slow our roll and to slow down and reconsider and rethink and reimagine what these goals might look like, because the Mars Jupiter relationship can think it's a little luckier than it is, and it can kind of overestimate its abilities, right? And so we really want to like reconsider what we are going after and how we are planning on getting there. This the Mars Jupiter is also kind of being squared by Saturn retrograde, and that will be in full effect during the August 19th full moon, which is going to be pretty wild. But Saturn is the planet of limitation, right? And structure, and is, as Mars and Jupiter are like, come on, let's do it. Saturn is putting on the brakes. And then Mercury is asking us to really come up with maybe a better plan, or refine our plan, or refine our ideas of what we are doing and why we are doing it, and how we are imagining on getting to this destination, or what we are seeking to achieve. And I think this is really the theme of the week. Um, and to be really kind of refining our ideas, our goals, what we are directing our energy towards, what we are desiring, right? And is what we are desiring just something to take us out of ourselves, to fill time, to kind of check out of the discomfort of the now? Or is what we are desiring something that is pulling us towards the sense of authenticity, pulling us into that kind of sunlight of the soul that is being initiated, or was initiated by the Leo new moon? And, it's probably not a clear-cut answer, right? It's like easy when we can step back and look at it retrospectively and be like, okay, that's how that went. In the moment, it takes a lot of sort of checking in and being like, what is this? What's this desire? Why am I hungering for this thing? Why do I want to go after that? What am I trying to do here? And is this the best way to meet my needs or achieve these goals? Right. And so I think that there are these kind of seeds that were planted during the new moon, and that are going to be developing throughout this lunar cycle and throughout this month. And I think part of this is thinking about what we really want to make real, right? What we want to make real, what we want to make tangible, what we want to make lasting. And this is coming from that square to Saturn, which again is going to culminate during the Aquarius full moon on August the 19th, which, there's a sun squaring Uranus. There's a T square between Venus, which is opposing Saturn and T squaring Jupiter. Like there's some big stuff going on during the full moon, and right now we are kind of in this building phase, right? The new moon just occurred yesterday. The moon probably won't even be visible tonight, but throughout the coming days, as the moon gains light, we will be able to see how things are unfolding. And I think that, again, this is a period of refining and really thinking about how am I moving towards these bigger goals? How am I moving towards what I'm passionate about? How am I moving towards what lights my fire? And what is the impact that that is having on other people and the world around me? And what am I making real through my actions and through the dedicated actions of my work? And what might need to be refined to allow that to be a little bit more skillful or on point with who I want to be and where I want to be and what my values really are. So that is the kind of like sweeping overview of the week, and kind of the themes that I am seeing emerging as we are kind of moving from new moon to full moon. Um, so yeah, and I think this week we are doing the groundwork that will help to make the work that we are doing and the work that we want to do really real. Also on Sunday, August the 4th, like I was saying, Mercury station retrograde. This station occurred at 4 degrees and 6 arc minutes of Virgo. And just a brief overview of Mercury's retrograde journey. They will retrograde back into Leo on August the 14th, and they will conjunct the sun the day before the Aquarius full moon. The Mercury cazimi occurs on August 18th at 26 degrees of Leo, and then they will station direct on August the 28th at 21 degrees of Leo. And so all of August, Mercury in Gatorade. Wah, wah. So, big purchases you really want to like consider and think about if you actually want to buy that. If you're buying things online, they might take longer to get there. I totally wanted to do some online shopping yesterday, and out of like sheer boredom. And I was like, no, Mercury stationing retrograde, don't do it. Don't do it. You can wait a month. And sometimes we can't wait a month, and that's okay. But, we just want to give a little bit more space around things. We want to not be so bound up in our expectations about when things are supposed to happen and when things are supposed to arrive, because we're going to need to slow it down, right? Also, if you have to sign contracts, if you can put it off to the end of the month, that's great. If you can't, that's also fine. Just, have some other people look it over, right? Basically, we just don't want to like rush into things and we don't want to be impulsive. And I think this gives us an opportunity. Virgo, which is where Mercury is stationed retrograde, is an earth sign, right? And so we get to get some somatic intelligence, right? And a couple weeks ago, I was talking about Mercury through Virgo as kind of the mycelial network, right? And the kind of underground network, which is what allows, it's mushrooms, right? And a fungal network that really is like the internet of the forest that allows trees and other woodland, life forms to communicate with each other, right? And we can think about how this works in the body, right? And it's the mycelial network or the communication network of our physical body. And I think about this as the nervous system and the somatic feelings that we get. And Mercury retrograde through Virgo allows us to really tune into what's happening in the body. What is this feeling that I am feeling? Is this like a longing or a nostalgia, right? What is the, name that I'm attributing to this feeling in the body? And then taking it a step deeper and being like, what is the actual feeling that I'm having without leaping to conclusions? Because it can be like, oh, I have this feeling. I'm so sad. And then it's like, is that actually sadness? Like, what is this actual feeling? Okay, I feel it in my belly, and it feels sort of like sinking, and I'm kind of like weak and a little weepy, and my belly feels empty. And what was the last time I ate? Oh, it's been like 6 hours. huh, maybe I'm not sad. Maybe I'm actually hungry, right? Um, so, being able to really think about or like tune into the wisdom and the intelligence of the body, and being able to, instead of just like leaping to naming things and leaping to conclusions, being like, okay, what is actually happening in the system? And like, let me slow down, take a breath, and sit with it for a moment and see the wisdom that my body might have. And Leah is saying there's also a long void moon today, from 8:15 to 2:16 Pacific time. Awesome. And the for those of you who don't know, the void of course moon is after a moon has made its last aspect in a sign and before it gets to another sign, or before it makes another aspect to a planet. And so when the moon's not aspecting anything, we're not kind of receiving the vibe, right? Because the moon is the satellite of Earth, right? And so it's sort of like always orbiting us and transmitting the energy of the celestial spheres down to us. And if it's not aspecting anything, then we're not like really picking up that real emotional information. And so, what is traditionally said about the void of course moon is it's like things initiated under a void of course moon won't come to pass, which, sounds like a bummer, but actually can be really, really beneficial. Because if you have things that you don't want to change, right? If you have things that you want to stay constant, if you want to deliver bad news, void of course is a great time to do it. And Nancy and Ronald Reagan had an astrologer who counseled Reagan to deliver bad news during the void of course moon. And the logic behind that was, if you're like, I don't know, if you're like oil prices just skyrocketed and you say that during a void of course moon, no one like people don't have like a real emotional hook to be able to like hold that. And so because the moon's not making any aspects, so it's like I don't really know what to do with it. And so nothing really comes of it, right? People aren't able to get like activated about it. That's sort of the logic. And so if you're like filing paperwork with things that you don't want like there to be a change in your status, void of course, I think is a good time to do that. If you've got to deliver bad news, anything that you're like, I don't want anything to change around this, or I don't want this to like really be seen or like noticed. I think the void of course moon is a great time to utilize for those things. If you want to like launch your website or launch a business or start something new, or like promote anything, void of course is not like a great time to do that because people will see it and they'll be like, I don't know what to do, right? Because we need that sort of emotional hook that pulls us into the thing, which is the moon making aspects to other planets or changing signs. And when it doesn't have that and it's just sort of drifting, we also kind of feel emotionally adrift. That's sort of my understanding of it. And those are the ways that I've kind of worked with the void of course moon. There's definitely been like paperwork that I've filed that I'm like, do not want my status to change at all. Like tax returns during like void of course, where I'm like, just want, totally cool, like just middle of the road, average stuff, whatever, things like that. Where, I think it like helps things to fly under the radar. Um, okay, coming back to Mercury retrograde. So in 2024, Mercury is retrograde in fire signs, starting with Sagittarius, and then we have Mercury stationing in Virgo, but retrograding back into Leo, and then oh, sorry, we had Sagittarius and then Aries, and then Mercury stationing in Virgo and retrograding back into Leo. There we go. Um, and so with Mercury retrograding through fire signs, it's asking us to rethink our passions, to reassess our motivations, and reconsider what we're using to fuel our inner fire. And so Mercury station retrograde in Virgo is kind of an outlier this year, which is bringing a more practical vibe to the party, which the fire signs are not so into. Um, in 2023, however, Mercury was retrograde exclusively in Earth signs. And this was asking us to rethink more physical, tangible, and practical parts of our life. So Mercury starting their retrograde in Virgo is revisiting some of these earthly and physical and structural themes that we were reimagining last year. And just for reference, Mercury was retrograde in Virgo. The last time Mercury was retrograde in Virgo was August 23rd of 2023 through September 15th of 2023. And during that time, Mercury moved from 21 degrees of Virgo back to 8 degrees of Virgo. And so if you want to, if you keep a journal, you can look back to what was going on between August 23rd and September the 15th of 2023, and there might be an echo to this station, to this beginning of the Mercury retrograde. Um, and so I don't know how all y'all felt about it, but like that was messed up. That was like a really intense time for me. And I feel like everything was like, blowing fuses and nothing was working and everything was just like all jammed up. And one of the things that I discovered, and maybe this was just me, and I'm curious to hear other people's takes on that time period. But one of the things that I realized is that Mercury has a lot of power in Virgo. They're in domicile, they're in exaltation, right? Mercury is living it up. And so they have all of this strength, and then they go retrograde, and it doesn't mean that like Mercury is in good condition, so the retrograde doesn't affect them. It is actually the opposite, is my understanding now, is that a planet in domicile who has a lot of power that then stations retrograde has much more power to wreak havoc. Like Gina Maria was saying, like blowing the power for 10,000 people during Tony Robbins event, right? Glitching up Instagram. Who knows? This is just the first day, but Mercury has a lot more power to do Mercury things, and in retrograde, Mercury has a lot more power to do Mercury retrograde things, which is miscommunication, misconnections, mechanical issues, shipping issues, things not going as planned, needing to slow down, needing to rethink and reconsider. And so again, maybe like uh giving a lot more space in your life if you can, right? And I have a friend who was born with Mercury retrograde, and I was like, yo, how does that work for you? And they were like, oh, I just have like, three phones, right? I have like really thick phone cases. I just sort of prepare for it because my phone is always breaking, or like things are always like glitching out, and they've figured out how to live with it because that is part of their natal chart. But I think having a backup, having, giving things more space, scheduling in more space, not scheduling, flights that have like very tight connections, not being like, oh, this thing needs to be delivered on this day or it's not going to work. And just being able to kind of roll with it. And when things don't go according to plan, because they're probably not going to go according to plan, being able to take a breath without melting down, without freaking out. Um, you know, and I talked about this last week, but when a planet is retrograde or when Mercury is retrograde, they slow down, right? And so they're like gaining power because they're moving slower and they're taking longer to like churn up stuff at a single degree, and they're moving closer to the Earth. And so that kind of like Mercury energy comes closer to us and becomes amplified. And Mercury deals with connections and the connections in our minds, the connections in our lives. And when they go retrograde, it disrupts all of these connections and causes us to slow down and rethink and reconsider the connections that we are making, why we are making them, what is the kind of web of connection that we are living in, what we are relying on, you know. And so Mercury in Virgo is also asking us to refine. Virgo is perfecting and it is refining, right? And so things that are sloppy might become very apparent right now, and we might need to like take some time to refine them a little bit. So another way to think about Mercury retrograde, um, uh, that nice one. Gina Marie is saying that they drop she drops her phone 10 times a day and sometimes rolls over it, and her phone is never broken. I want to know what phone case you use. And sorry, I'm just gonna check the messages. Oh, somebody also uh, somebody is just talking about the what I was saying about void of course moon, and they're saying that Peace Joy is saying I kind of knew not to start something during the void of course moon, but using it to remain slash stall something is genius. Oh, thank you very much. Also, the last thing that I'll say about void of course, which has nothing to do about with astrology or the moon, but it is one of my favorite books of poetry by the late Jim Carroll. And it's an excellent book that he wrote in the 90s, I believe. I think it was his last book of poetry, but he wrote a book called Void of Course, which is a collection of poems, which is how I learned about the Void of Course moon. This is way back when I was just a little punk rocker and not into astrology at all. But I always think about that book. Anywho, coming back to Mercury and their Gatorade adventure. And so Mercury, the psychopomp. Also, we can think about Mercury in Mercury's retrograde journey as an underworld journey, and this is a way that planets retrogrades can be conceptualized. And thinking about our kind of like external. The external motivation of a direct planet kind of bringing its significations into the world, and then the retrograde journey, which is an internal journey, right? Going down into the self, going down into the underworld, which, Mercury as the psychopomp, the messenger, is able to travel from the upper world, right, super consciousness, to the middle world, which is, normal consciousness, to the underworld, which is the unconscious. And so, this can be seen as a chthonic journey, or in a Jungian sense, the night sea journey, right? Or a catabasis. I think that's what it is, right? The underworld journey. And so this is a journey into the shadow and into the parts of the self that we don't want to look at, right? This is everything that has been like thrown into the shadow because we're like, I'm going this way, and then we hit that retrograde wall, and it's like, okay, like now I got to deal with this pile of stuff that I've just thrown into the shadow because I don't want to unpack any of it, right? And so during the retrograde, this is an opportunity to kind of listen to the unconscious and the ways that it manifests. And some of the ways that it manifests is through frustration, right? Is through things not working. And what we get is a trailhead, right? This like kind of lead into the unconscious when something doesn't work and we get frustrated, or we react without thinking. And that kind of immediate reaction gives us a little bit of information about what's going on here. And at the beginning of this feed, when Instagram wasn't working, I had all these like, oh no, I'm a failure, right? Like, I don't know, all of these sort of like unprocessed things started coming up because things didn't go according to plan. And I pivoted. And when I'm done with this, I get to take a little time and tune into those parts that got activated by this not working the way that I wanted it to. And I can, see what that has to tell me about my unconscious, about the kind of parts of me that are feeling some type of way about how things didn't work out the way that I wanted them to. And those parts probably unintegrated, right? Probably shadow material, probably stuff that I should be dealing with and I don't really want to deal with because I've got other things to do. And the retrograde is such a perfect opportunity to like be able to sit with these parts of the self that we don't want to deal with, that we generally don't have the time or the energy or the capacity to deal with because we are going in a direction that we have decided this is the right direction for me. However, there might be some unconscious feelings about that and unconscious parts of us that are like, wait a second, that's not actually what I want to do. That's not actually where I want to go. And, they might kind of throw temper tantrums about that. Right. And again, Mercury's job is making connections. And in the underworld journey, Mercury is making connections with the shadow parts of the self to help to integrate them. And, in our daily life, when things run smoothly, we don't have to deal with any of this, right? And we don't have to slow down and rethink and reconsider this is what I'm doing and why am I doing this, right? We're just kind of on the track, which is fine, except for, what can happen if we're on the track and we never take time to rethink and reconsider. Then we can be brought to a place that we never intended, and we can find ourselves living a life that is inauthentic because we've been listening to other people, we've been following, external motivations and external expectations instead of taking the time to really listen to what is authentic and real in the heart and in the soul, right, and in the psyche. And when Mercury is in Gatorade, it derails our plans and causes us to slow down and really think about and rethink about what we are doing. Um, and I want to tell this. I'm going to save this story. Um, and yeah, actually, whatever. I'll tell this story. Why not? So one of the ways that hold on, let me take a sip of my beverage because we don't actually have a lot going on this week, and I think that Mercury in Gatorade deserves some time. So one of the stories that I think is helpful about Virgo, which again is where Mercury is beginning this retrograde journey, um, is the story of the abduction of Persephone, and specifically Demeter's response to that. Right. And so Persephone is abducted by Hades, Pluto, Lord of the Underworld, who takes her from this golden field where she is sniffing a flower and abducts her and takes her into Hades, the underworld realm. And Demeter, her mother, goddess of spring and fertility and the harvest, is very upset by this and goes around, asking everybody, have you seen her? Where is my daughter? What's going on? Right. Hecate, the goddess of magic and the goddess of the dark moon, tells Demeter that she didn't see what happened, but she heard something, and she takes Demeter on this journey to look in all the dark places, right? And so Demeter is looking in dark places, which we can think about in the internal world, like where are the dark places in us, right? That when something is lost. Right. And Mercury retrograde tends to be about like expectations not being met and things getting lost in the confusion. It's not as like terrible per se as like a Plutonian abduction, which, I think about that as like those times where we get swept up with depression, right? Where just like we feel bummed out, where things aren't working, where we're depressed, and our sort of joy is taken, right? And I don't really see this being the case, but we're just talking here, right? But in the story, Demeter's joy is taken, and she goes and looks in all the dark places for where her joy might have gone. And, and I think with the retrograde, this is kind of an interesting idea of like looking in the dark places of the self, the unseen places, the internal places, the places that have been kicked to the curb and sort of relegated to the shadow. And as part of Demeter's kind of wandering the earth and looking for Persephone, she comes to a kingdom, right, and is hired by the queen Metri, we'll just call it the queen because I can't pronounce that. She's hired by the queen to be the nurse of the queen's son, Demophon. I can pronounce that one. All right. So Demeter Demeter basically like comes to Earth and becomes a mortal, right? Gives up her kind of divine nature to become a human being, partially looking for her daughter, and partially because she's really bummed out and feels betrayed by the celestial realm. And so, we can think about Mercury retrograde also as like coming back down to earth, especially in Virgo, and like giving up loftier aspirations, right? But coming back down into earth and being like, what's actually happening here? And so, as this nursemaid to Demophon, Demeter is like, "Oh, I'm gonna make him immortal." And so she starts this ritual that happens night after night, where she rubs him in this oil and then holds him over the fire to make him immortal and burn away his mortality. And so, what Demeter is trying to do is replace Persephone. She's like, "Well, my daughter's gone, and that sucks, and that's a bummer, and I really miss her, but I have another chance with this kid." Right. So, redoing and rethinking things, right? And trying to remake something that was lost. And on the last night, just as the ritual is about to be completed, the queen walks in and ruins the ritual. She screams, "What are you doing? Why are you holding my baby over a fire?" And Demeter puts down Demophon, takes off her disguise, and is like, "Well, that's fucked," right? And she's kind of pissed and demands that a temple is built to her, like right now. And she retreats into that temple and grieves the loss of her daughter and grieves the fact that she couldn't make Demophon immortal. And this is Demeter's real night sea journey, right? The depth of it, where she refuses to eat, she refuses to let crops grow, she refuses to let anything live, and refuses to use her magic or her powers until the gods step in, and because they're pissed, they're not getting their sacrifices, and so they need to negotiate a deal and get Hades to return Persephone so that things can begin to grow again. Um, and this negotiation is helping or like what they are doing is renegotiating things so that the natural order can return. And this is kind of like how the retrograde and underworld journey functions, right? Normal life is disrupted, and then things need to be rethought and reconsidered and renegotiated so that a new homeostasis is formed. If we are always in this sort of like state of homeostasis where we're always balanced, where we know what's happening, every day is the same, right? We're moving forward in good orderly direction. Nothing really changes, right? And things that need to sort of emerge or develop or transform or change can't occur. And so the retrograde kind of slows that process down and forces us to reconsider what we're doing, why we're doing it, and to renegotiate what's happening and how we make connections and how we relate to the world. And so that like the old order can be broken and a new order can emerge. And I think that is really the story of, or part of the story of Demeter and Persephone, because it goes from being endless spring and endless summer to a world where there are seasons, where summer turns into fall, which turns into winter, right? Which is when Persephone is in the underworld. And then cycle begins again with spring when new things begin to grow. And we can think about this sort of relationship in ourselves, right? The retrograde is it turning within in this night sea journey to really check in with what's important with us, right? And what might need to be renegotiated so that an old system can be let go and a new system can emerge. So that's some thoughts about the Mercury in Gatorade. And again, this is going to occur until the 28th of August, and Mercury will retrograde back into Leo on the 14th. So next week, right around the time that Jupiter and Mars are conjunct. And so we will talk about that next week. We got two more things that are going on this week, both of them on Wednesday, August the 7th. And so, yeah, we have Venus in we have on Wednesday, the 7th, we have Venus in Virgo, conjunct Mercury in Virgo at 3 degrees and 44 arc minutes. Oh, wait. Let me I'm gonna start with this one. Sorry. This is also happening Wednesday, August the 7th. We have the Sun in Leo sextiling Jupiter in Gemini at 15 degrees and 23 arc minutes. And so the Sun is in rulership in Leo, and it's coming off of Sunday's new moon, right? So we got this energy, right? And it's creating a supportive communicative aspect with Jupiter. Jupiter is in detriment in Gemini, right? But Jupiter is the greater benefic, and what they say is a benefic is always benefic, right? So in detriment, it might have less power to do its benefic thing, but it's still pretty good. It's still good to have on your team, right? And so Jupiter is a planet that brings big picture understanding, and the sun is about identity and clarity. And so the sun being the center of our solar system, right, it's what coheres things, it's what everything orbits around. And we have this supportive relationship with Jupiter, which gives us the big picture understanding about what are the ideas that are, are the cohering sense of our identity. What is the sort of thing that everything is orbiting, right? And I think that this sort of relationship between the sun, which brings clarity, right, and a sense of self, can kind of help with this, the confusion that Mercury is kicking up in their retrograde. Mercury is also ruling over Jupiter, right, because Jupiter is in Gemini. And so the retrograde is going to affect Jupiter. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But I think what this transit can help us do, the kind of good side of this, is it helps us to believe in ourselves and what we are doing, right? And the retrograde might cause us to slow down and reconsider what we believe in, right, and what we are striving for. But I think this transit can really help to foster confidence and allow us to tap into a more positive frame of mind. And the root of hope is that the belief that tomorrow will be better than today. And this is what Jupiter helps us to see, right? Jupiter is a planet of hope and faith and expansion, right? And so Jupiter is like, tomorrow will be better than today. And then the sun helps us to radiate that belief, right? And helps us to orient towards like, I can keep doing this because it's going to work out. And I think that this positive frame of mind is at the core of success. And so I think that Wednesday is a great time to reflect on our goals and our ideals, right? What we are striving for and why. And I think that idealism can be strong on this day, but instead of impulsively rushing in or just trusting that everything will work out, I think this is a great time to consider the best path forward to achieving our goals, right? And to think about what were the intentions that we set with this new moon and what are we striving for. And I think that this really helps us to see the big picture and helps us to see where all the pieces fit, right? And Mercury in retrograde can also be helpful with this, right? Reconsidering what we are doing with the pieces that we have all laid out, right? And so we get this kind of big bird's eye view on Wednesday, and we can be like, oh, these are all the pieces, and this is what isn't working, and these are what's not fitting. And so how do we reorient them? How do we think in a different way? How do we set some things to the side and revisit them later on? Right. And so like we can really take some time to rethink what we're working towards. And I think that the Sun Jupiter gives us this distanced perspective to see the larger view and how all these little bits and pieces can fit together to support that greater goal. But again, we need that what that greater goal is, right? We need that thing that we are cohering around, the thing that it's like, this is what I'm moving towards, right? And so this is a great time to really reconsider that, right? Um, Kind of on the downside, Jupiter is in detriment in Gemini, which happens to be a Mercury ruled sign, like I was saying. So Mercury just went retrograde, and so Jupiter in Gemini has created this sense of kind of splitting and fracturing in a lot of things and a lot of confusion, especially on in the political sphere. One of the examples of Jupiter and Gemini that I've seen is, the kind of splitting of the Democratic Party, which is now like reconsolidating, right? We also might have a splitting of the Republican Party, which is maybe reconsolidating. I don't know, but there's a lot of like confusion and up in the air and like different camps, which is sort of fostered by Jupiter and Gemini. Right. And I think that Mercury brings a real trickster energy, and Gemini is like has a lot of trickster energy encoded in it. And I think that trickster energy going retrograde is like going to amplify it, and Jupiter really makes things bigger, right? So I think Jupiter has a potential to increase the sense of confusion and potential for misinformation. The sun sextile, I think, provides some stabilizing influence and bringing a little clarity to the situation. However, that there's a chance that the sun, which represents a leader or solar figure, being amplified by some misinformation and confusing trickster influences of Jupiter and Gemini. So, watch out for things that sound too good to be true. Watch out for false prophets or like people trying to sell you swampland in Florida or a bridge in Brooklyn, because I think that there is the trickster energy is strong this week also. All right. So the last transit that we're going to talk about is also occurring on Wednesday, August the 7th. And this is Venus in Virgo, conjunct Mercury in Virgo at 3 degrees and 44 arc minutes of the mutable Earth sign of Virgo. And so their last conjunction, just for reference, was on June 17th at 0 degrees of Cancer. Right, so that was, some emotional information, kind of deep in the Cancerian waters of the feels, and this is in much more practical and refined Virgo. So less about like how things are feeling, maybe more about practical application of relationships and values. And so the other thing that I want to say is that this transit is occurring on Wednesday, August the 7th. Wednesday is Mercury's day, right? Miércoles, right? Mercury's day. Um, and so on a planet's day, it gets the spotlight and the microphone, right? And it's sort of like it's the planet's turn to do the open mic, right? And so that planet tends to be amplified on its day. And so Mercury has dignity in Virgo, and Wednesday it's its day. So Mercury's significations are going to be pretty strong on Wednesday. And so watch out for Mercury things this coming Wednesday, especially Mercury retrograde types of things on Wednesday. And so on a planet's day, it has the power to talk because it has the microphone. And so the planet tends to talk about its experience. And so Mercury is probably going to be talking about its experience, which is retrograde. And so, listen for what Mercury has to say about being retrograde, so I think that it's going to amplify that retrograde vibe. They're also going to be conjunct Venus on this day. So Mercury is probably going to be talking about some Venusian themes like love, beauty, and relationships. And, this is probably around the time that like exes are going to start contacting you because that is a, Mercury retrograde thing. Also, that is something that Mercury tends to say in retrograde, especially when conjunct Virgo, excuse me, especially when conjunct Venus is, oh man, I was thinking about that relationship. Remember when, right? Thinking back about old relationships. And so, yeah, you can probably set your watch to your exes are going to text you on Wednesday. What you do with that is you're up to you, but I just want to let you know. Um, so Venus is in fall in Virgo, and Mercury rules Virgo and has exaltation, but they're moving retrograde. So, Venus has a challenging time getting their needs met. And one of the reasons why is because in Virgo, Venus can get hung up on wanting things to be perfect. Right, it can be waiting for the perfect relationship. It can be holding people to or situations to unrealistic standards or expectations, right? That can make Venus feel some type of way, right? Like their needs are not getting met or nothing is good enough. And so, with the conjunction to the ruler of the sign, Mercury, I think it can help bring a sense of clarity to relationships and Venusian situations, and also some clarity to our expectations. Now, I think this conjunction is asking us to reflect on our values, right? Venus is a planet of values, and Mercury retrograde is asking us to rethink our values and perhaps bringing a little clarity about what the values we are living by, right? And we can ask, am I living in accordance with my values, right? What am I centering in my life, right? And is that in relationship to my values? And if not, why? And if so, how, right? Can also ask, am I getting enough joy out of my life? Which is what Venus is all about, joy and pleasure. Am I experiencing enough love? How can I refine my life and live in better alignment with what I love and what I value? Right. So I think these are all kind of questions that are going to be coming up that are going to be amplified by Mercury having the microphone on Wednesday, right? And I think this is also a really good time for creativity because Mercury is thinking in ideas and making connections, and Venus is art and beauty. Right. So this can give us some clarity on the creative process and help us to translate our ideas through a creative process practice. Right. And so Mercury is retrograde, and so it might be slow going, and you might not just like crank out your masterpiece on this day. But I think it's a great time to work through ideas creatively. And this might be a really good time for expressing that inner world that we talked about, that shadow material, through creative practice like writing, journaling, painting, sculpture, dance, movement, etc. Right. And so Mercury in their underworld journey might be causing us to slow down and reflect on parts of ourselves that we haven't been able to express, right? And this is a good time to process things creatively. And the left brain is logical and verbal, and the right brain is visual and creative. And this is kind of an oversimplification, but we can think about the right brain as speaking through images. So this conjunction, we can think about these two sides of our brain meeting up and being able to communicate, right? I did say that there is a Mercury-Venus conjunction coming up. That's happening on Wednesday the 7th. Um, and so being able to kind of bring our like logical, Mercury mind to the creative Venusian mind, right? And bringing these together. So we are kind of allowing ourselves to, bridge this sort of gap. I think that being able to use images to communicate to the mind, right, to the soul, helps to process information that doesn't have language, right? Or we don't know how to say things that like we can't really touch or like don't have an expression. And so I think being able to, use poetry or writing or, play is a really good way of kind of tuning in to, the material that may not have a place in the mercurial language yet. And so we can communicate with that unconscious through images and through symbols. Um, and so last but not least, and to round out this report, the Mercury Venus conjunction in Virgo, is also a good day to express your feelings and to tell people how you feel, right? And we might get some clarity on our feelings, especially if we've been doing that Mercury underworld sort of shadow work, right? And Venus loves being social and Mercury loves talking. And so talking with friends and people that you value is pretty on brand for what's going on Wednesday, especially with that Jupiter, right, expansion and Sun sextile, right, which is like expanding my sense of self, right, and place in the world. And so like going and talking to people, right? I think it's a really kind of beneficial day for that. Um, uh, and so um because Mercury is retrograde, watch out for that like sense of impulsivity, right? Being like, oh, I had this feeling and I've got to go tell somebody. Slow it down, right? Think it through, right? This might not be a great time to just like kick in your coworker's door and tell them that you love them, right? But you might like compliment them on what they do, right? And so being able to take it slow and not be impulsive, and we might have feelings that emerge, right? And thinking about what can I do with this? Being able to sit with the feeling, sit with the impulse, sit with the desire for a little while, and figuring out ways of translating it and expressing it without needing to act on it immediately. Because again, we are slowing our roll and we are rethinking, reconsidering, reimagining what we are orienting to and the best path forward. And so that is my kind of thought for the week. And that brings us to the end of this week's Astro weather forecast. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, I'm just going to check the comments real quick. Michelle is saying that they have Mercury and Venus conjunct in their natal chart. Okay, so I'm curious what sign it's in for you, or whether it's an immutable or fixed or, um, uh, you know, where that's going on, because I think that there will be resonance with this, but especially if it's resonant in by aspect. I'm curious about that. Okay, in Gemini. All right, so another Mercury ruled sign, and square to that. Um, uh, Oh yeah, the 7th is a great day to design a newsletter and play with Canva all day. What I would say though is like, have somebody else read it over before you just send it out, right? And I think that's good Mercury retrograde practice, right? Like I think it's a great day to sort of be doing that creative work, but before you're like, yeah, like in the flow and just hit send, and there might be misspellings because you were so into the imagery, right? Have somebody else read it over. And uh, yeah, and I think that the 7th is a great time to have a chill, lazy day. And also, I think it's an interesting day to see how this Mercury retrograde signification comes through, because again, it is Mercury's day. And so this is the first Wednesday since Mercury station retrograde. So I think this is going to be a time that we're like, oh, that's what this is going to be like, or that's what Mercury has to say about their retrograde. And being able to tune into that, I think, will be supportive of how we navigate the retrograde journey. Um, okay. Um, all right. So I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you all for tuning in for another episode of This Week in Space. Thanks for coming over from Instagram. Sorry that didn't work, but what are we going to do? Mercury and Gatorade, you know what I'm saying? I appreciate you all, and thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that this was helpful. Just so you all know, I do a astrology-themed radio show each and every week called the Melee Report. I just posted that on my stories and Instagram, and I will, so you can click the link to that and listen to it. It is basically this, but less talk, more rock. So instead of me like, doing all the talking, I pick music that I think fits with the themes of the Astro-Weather of the week. And I'll play some songs, talk about how they relate to the Astro-Weather. So that's another offering that I have, and another way of getting your Astro-Weather if you would rather dance to it than just sit here and listen. Um, and yeah, that's all the Astro-Weather that is fit to print, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is my great pleasure and joy to get to do this, and I want to thank AstroStar for hosting this and helping support this ongoing practice. So thank you, Rainey. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all. Y'all have a great rest of your day and an excellent week in space. And until next time, may the force be with you, my friends. And I will see you next time, same wizard channel for another week in space. All right. Take care, y'all.